Hello there. I'm Greg Knecht, Deputy Executive Director for the Florida chapter of the Nature Conservancy. I'm happy to take a few minutes to chat with you guys about something that's very important to myself and the Nature Conservancy here in Florida. Before I do that, I want to take just a little bit of time and talk to you about the Nature Conservancy as an organization and how I came to the Nature Conservancy and why I care. So the mission of the Nature Conservancy is to protect the lands and waters on which all life depends. And just real briefly, this is, most people think of the environment and, animals and plants and all of that, but it's also important that we include people in that. And so the Nature Conservancy cares about protecting people and the resources that they depend upon them, as well as the resources themselves. The Nature Conservancy is a global organization. We're actually in 79 countries around the world. And so we have a tremendous impact because we work in all kinds of places. Real briefly, this is kind of what we do. We hit all the environments that most people can think of. Obviously climate is a big issue facing the planet, and we work on climate and climate related impacts, as well as trying to mitigate some of those impacts. We work on the land. We actually started as an organization that just purchased land and set it aside. Now we actually work with folks who use the land, farmers and others. We work on cities and how do we grow as a population smartly. Of course, freshwater, and here in Florida in the South, freshwater is incredibly important. And so we focus on the freshwater and the freshwater environment. And then, of course, healthy coasts, which includes also, healthy fisheries. So the Florida chapter, this is kind of my job, has been around since 1961. We have over 100,000 supporters here in the state. And we have, protected, this is the Nature Conservancy here in Florida itself has protected over 1.25 million acres. And we have another 50,000 acres that we actually manage ourselves here in Florida. So wanted to briefly, very briefly talk to you about today, which is something that is incredibly exciting and near and dear to my heart. I grew up here in Florida and have spent a lot of time all across the state. And what I'm going to talk about is one of the resources that we have in Florida that is, if you've ever had the opportunity to, paddle one of a spring-fed river or go for a swim in a spring itself, how amazing these jewels are, and how important they are to be protected. Before I launch into kind of the canary in the coal mine, I guess, given the audience, that may be an outdated term. So let me just briefly share, what the canary in the coal mine is to give you a little bit of perspective. The canary in the coal mine was actually a canary in a cage that back in actually up until about the 1980s, coal miners used to take the canary in a cage down into the mine with them, and the canary would indicate when there was unsafe conditions, specifically, carbon monoxide. So, if the canary stopped singing, then the miners knew that, the air was dangerous and that they needed to do something about it. Well, our springs, Florida Springs, and actually Georgia Springs as well in the southern part of Georgia, are indeed very similar to the canary. They can demonstrate or indicate for us when conditions in Florida are unhealthy as well. And I'm going to show you some slides that are actually pretty stark and really show that Florida Springs really are a great indicator, and we should pay attention and start making some changes. So our springs really are directly connected to the ground. I mean, this is the water that is, under Florida, and it is our drinking water, Floridians drinking water, and certainly, as I mentioned, in South Georgia, where the water comes out of out of the ground. In Florida here, it's about 95% of our water that we use for people and for agricultural comes from the ground. And you can see here in this picture, I mean, this is a set of divers, cave divers specifically in Huxley Springs, that are entering into the aquifer. And this shows how connected that the groundwater and the surface water is. And so, as I mentioned, as an indicator, when our springs are indicating issues, we really do know that we're having issues with our groundwater. So why do we care? Why is this even important that springs are an indicator, and why should we pay attention? Well, Florida specifically is growing. And as I mentioned, we get the majority of our water from the ground. And the more people, that means more water that's needed for all kinds of reasons, including watering our lawns, washing our dishes, flushing our toilets, irrigating our crops. So the more people, the more water we're going to need. And here is our population by 2030. So 10 years, we're going to have 26 million people in Florida. Well, that's a lot more folks needing a lot more water and a lot more food. So we're going to continue to have demand on our water supplies. So this is just a slide of where all of these people are going. You can see in the kind of current, I guess I'll call that brownish, orange-ish color. That is where the current development is, and the upper right or the right hand picture of the map is where land use or development is going. And so, as I mentioned, more people means the need for more water, and that need for more water is actually going to increase about 20 to 30% above what we are currently using. That also means that aquifer, or as I mentioned, groundwater levels and the quality of water, which we've already seen has declined, if we don't make any changes, will continue to decline. And then more people also and more uses can contribute to increased nutrients, which results in water quality impacts. And I'll show you a couple examples of what I mean here. So much fun to go back and look at some history, in this case in Florida. This is White Springs. For those of you who are familiar with, I'll give you a couple landmarks. West of Jacksonville, north of Orlando. Before Disney and before all of the attractions, people came to Florida because they believed that the springs had healing qualities. And there were, in many places where there were springs, there were resorts where people came and sat in the springs because of the high mineral content and others. This is White Springs in 1914. And you can see, I mean, the water there at the bottom, folks were just hanging out. So this is the same spring today, taking kind of from this pictures taken from the vantage of the people who are sitting there. So we're kind of looking out over where the water was or should be. And so this clearly indicates that, that water didn't just disappear. It's been consumed, and we're not allowing the aquifer or the groundwater to reach the historic levels that it did. And we're essentially over consuming is really what this is demonstrating. And this is just one place. I mean, we have lots and lots of indicators of we are over consuming, and we need to figure out a way to better manage. And I'll talk about that in just a second. Here's another picture, in this case, focused on the quality side. This picture is taken from the same vantage point. It's Huxley Springs State Park. This was the first one, as you can see, was taken in 1995, and the second one in 2012. And look at the stark difference. We had healthy grasses, we had crystal clear water. Now the grasses are all gone. We have filamentous algae. That's the green kind of stuff growing on the rocks and elsewhere. And you can see the overall clarity itself has diminished. What does this all mean? If the springs are our canary and are indicating that we have these issues. Essentially, what that means to myself and the Nature Conservancy and lots of others who are concerned is we need to act. And there are certainly things that we can do and are doing. We should enact smarter, better policies on how we use water. We're working with cities and agriculture to reduce how much they use and implementing practices to improve quality of the water that comes off of those lands and other things. And then specifically, and probably most importantly, we need to recognize that water is a resource and should be valued and not wasted. More and more people coming, there's more and more need and more demand. And we have to just treat the water and value water so that it's there in the future. In parting, I'll just say, I think that there are tremendous opportunities to solve these problems. We're already working on many of these. They do take time. They're complicated, but the fact that we have this canary, in this case, springs that can tell us when our practices are being effective and when we're over allocating or overusing water, we really do have the opportunity to make those changes. And with that, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and talk to you a little bit about Florida Springs and Nature Conservancy.